Well,
round.
on that note, Greg,
Welcome.
we'll go ahead and get started. So
Yeah,
first, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really
for
appreciate your
sure.
time and coming on here today.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? Thanks for having me and try and help get some truths out in the world. It's getting
Yeah,
crazy. I appreciate it. I
no,
really do.
yes. So we're gonna kind of jump right into it here because our listeners, for those of you listening, I know you had a quick intro about Chris, but he'll tell a little bit of a story. The idea is we talk about a number of different cases, sometimes related to law enforcement, policy, law, and how that affects us physically or psychologically, sociologically, physiologically, how these things affect individual people, and then extrapolate that, or scale that out to everyone, right, in a society, and then what you can kind of glean from that. And we kind of haven't really had anyone on from your perspective to tell the story, because it's important like we always say, hey, what does the data tell us? What do the numbers show? All
Right.
right. But we know, Greg and I know that's not the full story. And
Right.
what happens is you don't always get the ground truth of someone going through a situation and what they felt like and what it was for them, because it's really important. It's important from your perspective being in law enforcement. It's important to hear from the community perspective, from the city perspective. I mean, you got to listen to that, and go, okay, because our thing is, like, our perfect example is when we're talking about, physiological reactions and what happens to your brain and to your body. If you feel like you're under attack, guess what? You are. Meaning
Right.
there's no difference. Like, someone can say, well, you're technically not because of this, but if you feel that way, then that's what it is. That's the truth of the matter for that individual. So we like to kind of get that story out. And then yours being from, you went from one law enforcement agency, you saw
Right.
a lot of things going on and going in a direction you didn't like, and you literally sort of picked up yourself, your life, your career, and moved across country to go find something better, and because still doing the job that you love doing.
Right.
So it's an interesting perspective because we've heard a lot about this, right? And most people listening, if they don't have any direct involvement, especially with law enforcement, yeah, they might hear a story about that. They might see it on the news, or hear about one state hiring, but like, they don't often get to interact with someone who's actually had to do that. So we
Right.
wanted to
So
have you kind of come on. Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
Right.
we get a witness
Yeah.
that we can
Yeah.
depose or interview, not interrogate yet. Uh,
Yeah.
but there's one of three places that Chris is coming from, Brian, as a copper with double digits. He's either coming or going to court to testify, or he's
Right.
coming or going to bed
Right.
because he's got to get ready for his shift, or he's coming or going to a bar to
Right.
get ready for either his shift or his court testimony. So we figured
Right.
we'd get you out, get a little vitamin D. You get what I'm saying? Get a little vitamin A coursing through your
Right.
system. So that's really what we're doing, a community service thing, Brian.
Right. 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 And I
There-
appreciate that. And so does
That's
my
great.
bar bill.
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. Well, so Chris, I'll have you kind of go in and give a little bit of background about your story and kind of what I just talked about from your perspective, and then we can dive into some of the details and pull the thread from there of other stuff that we've seen. But I'd love to kind of throw it to you first to give the story of where you're at, and you can talk about, now you're kind of in your involvement with this Three Cops Talk podcast that you have as well.
Right. So, well, thanks again for having me on the show. So real quick, my background is, I got my master's. I was a chief financial officer for a number of years, and I've always wanted to be the police. So everybody could read my bio at some point. So I decided to take up my passion and be the police. So to put it in perspective, my first year's salary as a policeman was my previous year's bonus in finance, and it was just a passion. So throughout my career, I did canine. I did a lot of things I want to do. I loved it. And then everything's kind of started to change to where the police apparently became the bad guy. And that's where a lot of people felt. And we'll get more detail, but one of the things that kind of pushed it over the edge was this whole thing that this whole George Floyd thing, because we're out there and everybody knows about the protests and what happened and all this other stuff. And we're out there and just getting the snot knocked out of us, and we're knocking the snot out of people, and they're throwing mortars at us, and we're fighting, and we're all kind of standing around going, well, wait a minute. Why is everybody mad at us when we agree what he did was wrong? Well,
Right.
Why are we fighting? Like what
Yeah.
what are we all agree because he went through the process and he got what the judge gave him. And I feel if it was a civilian, it would have been the same type of scenario. So we're all kind of standing out there and we're like knee deep in blood and glass and everything going, where is this going? Why are we doing this? But we all still had a passion for it. And then after that, our law started to change. So in Illinois, we lost qualified immunity. You can't foot chase unless you get a sergeant's approval. You have to ask 5 times before you tase somebody. That kind of stuff. And you kind of, it was just like, well, wait a minute. I still love the work, but I am not going to lose everything that I've worked so hard for going out there and doing the right thing. And listen, we all know that there's bad apples and barrels. We get it. I don't care what you are, and it's going to happen. But it was the broad brush, and I was actually having a conversation with with a guy on my show, and he actually brought it into it's a racist bias. It's racial because you're a cop. It's one felt brush swoop of a brush that you're bad, that you want to kill everybody. Just like, and he was explaining to it, just like when people look at a black guy or a Hispanic or an Asian or whatever, and they paint this braid brush, it's racial. And so we got into a deep conversation about it. And long story short, I still love the work. My friends still love the work. So we just kind of took our 20, got out and went to different departments where people want to have law and order and they want to have us around. And I think what was happening in other places that it was becoming so lawless and so fruitless that one of my last cases was we had an 82-year-old lady. She got punched in the face and had her orbital bone broken.
Jeez.
I'm at the gas station. He steals the purse. I'm at the gas station and I see him running. And I can't release the dog because there's way too many people. Go after him. Foot chase is on. I get him. My partner gets on him. He swings. I move my head. My partner hits him once, rolls him over, cuffs him. It's done. So we're trying to explain this to the state's attorney. The state's attorney's going, yeah, well, he didn't hit you. I go, no, because I moved my big Polish melon. I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I'm not going to get hit in the face. And she goes, well, we really prefer contact, because that's actually a battery. I'm like, so wait a minute. I said, so you're telling me that my partner committed a battery and I'm an accessory because I didn't stop it from happening when I'm wrestling this guy who just punched an 83-year-old lady in the face and broke her face?
Yeah.
So it was just a lot of that going on, and just you still have people that have a passion for the work, and that's kind of like myself and a couple of my friends just up and picked up our families, took our 20, 21, 22 and out, and started someplace else where we can still be the police and again, at least the place we're going. I mean, we still have bad policemen, but they're prosecuted, but there's not like protests and stuff. They're treated like the criminal that they are, if they are.
Right. So let me throw a sociological perspective in here. And Chris, I know that some of this is going to be hard to talk about, but it's great to get it out and get it on the table. So, Brian, if I can depose you for just a second, what number are we up to on the George Floyd case right now, monetarily?
I think the estimates it's something like north of $6 billion it's cost overall. I mean,
Okay.
something like it might be higher, but
So
that's what
let's
we've
keep
heard.
that in our mind when we're talking for a second,
Yeah.
because that is a catalyst, Chris. But that's not the only catalyst. That's not the only thing you saw go sideways or start the decline. It was a big one, but I would say sociologically and certainly psychologically, think about looking through a straw. And if you look at through a straw at your entire career, it's hard to get all of those to coalesce into one clear picture. Do you get what I'm saying? You kind of look here and you remember that part of your career and you look here, and then you back up and you look at this. And so if you open your aperture, you look at things better. Now, here's a dichotomy. If we had a hunter on the show and the hunter was saying, yeah, at which point I make sure my 300 Win mag is dialed in and I'm using a 180 grain boat tail. Okay, you're going to get some people that are going to listen to that and go, why would you kill an animal when you can go to the store and buy one? So the reason I'm saying the straw analogy and the hunter analogy is we've got listeners right now that already said, oh, well, it's just a property crime. It's only a purse. And yeah, okay, the old lady, that's the price of doing business. And you shouldn't take it personally with chasing people. How many years were you a copper in that first agency?
In Illinois, 21.
Okay. So after 21 years, Brian Marin, it's safe to say that Chris has he's seen life from both sides now, from in and out. That great Joan Baez song or whoever that is, somebody will correct me.
Right.
But the idea is that what happens is, one, you're operating within the law. Legal, moral, and ethical is the way to go. One. Number two, there's bad people out there. Do a ride along, figure out what crime is all about, because there are some real bad people that don't want to go to jail out there. Three, you got a series of dedicated cops, and people call it the thin blue line, but that's been bastardized where people think what that means is we close ranks and we'll take one for the team and lie about other cops and say, no, he was there, or drop a gun. Folks, that shit only happens in Hollywood. And you're saying, oh, yeah, well, people get exonerated from prison. Hey, we didn't put him in prison. Right. The idea is the jury put him in prison. So what's happening here, Chris, I want you to understand is the perspective of some viewers, and you have a show, so you know exactly what I'm going to talk about. You're going to get somebody that goes, oh, when he mentioned race, he played the race card. That's not what you're talking about. No. What you're talking about, I think, is that you're talking about there's clearly defined rules, and this is one of those professions where when you step behind the velvet ropes, you get to see the fraud and the waste and the abuse and the rape and the misogyny and the horror and the violence. So how did you, and this is the question, long way around the house, the question, how did you stay 21 years and finally draw the line at Floyd? There had to be precipitating events where you saw the wind changing. You get where I'm going? That you felt the change. Please kind of let it in on us so everybody knows that it wasn't an ironclad right now decision, that this crept up on you.
So, over the years, I mean, everybody, being on the streets, you see the pendulum swing. 9/11, everybody liked the police.
Right.
And then, and then it kind of goes back to the middle, and then it would swing that everybody didn't like the police because of this. And then it would swing back to the middle, and then everybody liked the police. So the pendulum would always swing, and you knew that. And during that pendulum swing, you saw bad coppers get prosecuted that tarnished a badge. You saw bad people get prosecuted. You saw, the whole us and them type of cat and mouse game that's been going on for years.
Right.
But what really started to happen after that were more and more policemen were just being ambushed. More and more policemen were just getting brutalized. More and more citizens were getting brutalized and people not being punished for it. So we're out there and we're doing what we need to do to bring the people to justice. And by the way, I'm going to say, and I know people who throw out percentages are highly percentages wrong, but I'm going to say during this whole thing, the majority of the people wanted the police on the street. The majority of the people didn't like the fact that people weren't being prosecuted, but that's a whole other story.
No, that's a great point, because because Greg and I were talking about that too, is how you have, and it from your work in law enforcement, but you got different areas of a city. Let's say you got people that, hey, they make really great money. They're in that upper middle class to upper class area, right? You got some middle class where it'll mix, and then you got some folks struggling, trying to make it up to that next level, right? And unfortunately, sometimes they're the victims in a lot of these situations, right? And they don't get the attention they deserve. And they don't want that in their neighborhood, because they're trying to make it better. They're trying to get out of that. Maybe they grew up in that type of neighborhood and they're going, look, I'm trying to get out. I don't want this. We want peace. We want security. We want safety here. We want our kids to be able to walk to school. All the rich folks on the other side of town get that, right? Because the criminals don't go in there because they know they're going to stick out, right? And someone's going to call the police, right? Well, they can operate in my area. So what you're talking about is that people in the middle there that are like, no, like we want this. And since they don't have as much of a voice, maybe as some activist who has a big following on social media, right? They can't get it out there that they're going like, no, like when you back off like this, it sends a message. Now it all gets thrown around. People are saying, well, you got to change sentencing guidelines for nonviolent crime and this, and you know what, if it's drugs, we shouldn't arrest. Like, okay, there may be certain parts in there that are logical and make sense, but you can't take, like you just said, with people who are doing with the police, and take a broad stroke over everything and say,
Right.
well, just throw it on everything. Because, well, hang on. What people don't understand, what a lot of people don't understand about the law, is that it's a case by case basis. Like, you can't necessarily look at one case and then immediately compare it to the other one and go, see, it's the same. It's like, well, no, many of the circumstances were different. Therefore, this requires a different level of force, or a different level of incarceration, or a different approach. And because it's not black and white, well, it's a little complicated. It's nuanced. So that means it takes time
Right.
and calories for me to
Right.
try and understand it. I don't want to do that, right? So
Right.
I just I want to hit that point, because it's such a good point, is that there are a lot of people who do want that, and they don't have a voice. They don't have the ability to come out there, because maybe even their neighbors are like, hey, we can't do that right now.
So, Chris, put me on the ground. Okay. The reason that you were there in a tumultuous situation right after George Floyd is because you and all your cop buddies agreed that Floyd should have been choked to death, and so you were fighting with the community. Is that an accurate portrayal? No, but
No,
but
no,
how
right.
did
Not at
media
all.
portray that, right?
Right.
So the idea is you were there to maintain order. You were there to protect
Right.
structures and protect livelihoods and protect lives. And
Right.
the idea is that they only looked, and this is where I like how you're amending your definition of race, because what you're saying is they
Yeah.
only looked at your blue color,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? And that's
Right.
all they saw. They didn't
Right.
they didn't understand there was a man behind there. They didn't understand there's a father behind there and a husband behind there, and all
Right.
the other, all the wives you've had because you're a cop, and all the
Right.
things that you've experienced and that you've seen. And see, that's the problem, is there was no level of communication at that point. It was all an escalation of violence. And the problem is that now we look back and we talked about so much change. Do you remember how everything was supposed to be instrumental in the change? After George Floyd, things were going to be different. We were going to look at different cops that broke the law or abused the law or bent the law. We're going to look at it differently. And the fact of the matter is, we didn't do any of that.
Right.
But you still had a lead. You still felt that you had to get up and go. And we call that voting with your feet. So take us through how hard that process was. Take us through those a couple of days, weeks, months, whatever you're doing. Because I remember what it was like leaving the Detroit metropolitan area, and it was the hardest decision in my life. But it was a decision I knew that I had to make. So take us into your head on that, your head space and time.
So, basically I was I had another dog, and I was working canine, and I loved it. I mean, I had a lot of fun. And it's, to me, it's probably one of the best, or the best job in the police department. And but I still had a passion for going out there. I was the oldest guy on my shift, and on
Right.
midnights. They're like, dude, you're like 50 and you're still working midnights. Like, what? You should have been on days like 10 years ago. So, I mean, I went out there, and I love what, and I'll be in it, because the young people were aggressive, and we went out there and we did cop stuff and whatever. And then I just started seeing that pendulum swing the other way. Like, when you're on a call, people are actually making an effort to come confront you. Like, they're
Right.
making an effort to come, where most people be like, yeah, it's the police. I probably don't want to be there, you know, or it was, it was people coming out of the way to cause even more trouble. And it was like, what are we doing? Like, it just got crazy. So one day, um, one of the things was that I just started thinking, like, I I'm out here doing what I love to do. I don't like bullies. I love enforcing the law. I love putting bad people away. I love making people know that that they're going to have a safer day because of what I do. And it sounds corny. It sounds like you're going to an interview, but that's why a lot of us do it.
Yeah.
But I started going out there, and I'm like, I don't have to worry about the people that I'm possibly going to fight, or I got to go to a call. I got to worry about the people that are supposed to be on my side.
Right.
That was really the thing. I mean, because at least on the street, as people know, when you could have a conversation with people and you talk to them and you take that extra minute and you may strike a rapport, you may agree just to say, hey, you're the police and I'm going to kill you and you're a bad guy, I'm going to put you in jail, and but at that moment, you each go your separate way. But it came to be more and more that you were second guessing yourself because you weren't worried about getting hurt from the bad guy. You weren't worried about going into that dark room. You were worried about, if I go into that dark room and I take care of business, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to end up in
Right.
jail,
Right.
and that was really the big thing. And then, conversations with my wife, and I had my 20 years in and stuff like that. And it was really the point that came that you had to start worrying about what's going to happen to me,
Yeah.
Yep.
even if I do everything right. Even if I do everything right, it's a good shoot or whatever. And
Well,
what am I going to have to go through to prove that I was right?
and
Chris,
that kind of
please go ahead, Brian.
what you brought up and what you're talking about now is something I've seen in other areas, and what it is I think going the wrong direction. And what I mean by that is, we, instead of saying, okay, you know what, we need to review our policies, and then we need to do additional training on these policies, or we need
Right.
to get some other experts in here, let's talk about the best way forward, and let's increase the capability of the officer on the ground. We take the exact opposite approach. And what do? They take away responsibility. You know what, Chris? With your 20 years, you know what? You no longer have the ability to make this call in the
Right.
situation. That's going to go up to higher. And we think that's oversight, or that's going to help in the situation, because sometimes it can. But what you're really doing is, I'm taking away responsibility from you. I'm saying you're not allowed to do that anymore. And that doesn't solve the problem. It actually can make it worse, because what
Yeah.
happens over time is, now we're building automatons. We're not building people that can think on their
Right.
own. We're people that go, okay, situation C happened. Okay, you have choice one, two, or
Right.
three. All right, you
Right.
chose three. Okay, here's the three things you can. That's just not how it is, right?
Right.
You have to instill in them the competence and confidence to go make the right decision at the right time for the right reason. But that's not what we were doing. I mean, I literally saw that. I saw that in the Marine Corps, when I was first in and I had some pay issues and had to go to the admin building, right? And there was a separate line. If you were E5 or above, if you were a sergeant or above, you got your own separate line. You didn't have to wait with everyone else, right? You got
Right.
faster service. And
Right.
then when I was leaving, you know what that line was? They just changed that sign. It was E5 and below. So
Right.
now E5 no longer meant that you were behind the velvet ropes. You were still
Right.
Right.
the general population. And I'm like, you're taking away that responsibility. And so I see it in other areas. I'm sorry, Greg. I know you had something
No,
else
no,
you want to
no.
add.
No.
I'm
Right.
spot on with you. And Chris, I got
Right.
to tell you this, from a copper to a copper. So the day that I knew I had to go, so I had a higher felony arrest record than anybody else in any of the counties that worked anywhere near the city where I was working. I was getting awards, and it's not why I was a cop. I was a cop the same way that you said. For the underdog, I didn't like bullies, okay? But I was
Right.
getting awards because I was out there doing the stuff that nobody else was doing. I was out there risking my ass for our community, for our people that lived there. So every night I'd get an award, and everybody would clap, and then they'd say, "See me after roll call," and my boss would say, "Swear to God, I'll put you in prison. You're going to be on, welfare line. You're going to be back in." And I'm like, "What am I doing? I'm doing my job." "Yeah, but
Right.
you doing your job, you're out there, you make work for me, and I didn't, sign up." And so,
Right.
you got all them oxygen thieves that just through longevity stuck around forever, and they didn't want
Right.
to do nothing. And I
Right.
was on midnights. I was a dinosaur on mids. I know what that's like, right? And
Right.
I sat there and I thought, okay, so I'm working a mid car. I'm working plain clothes. I just got a National Heroism Award for this stuff. And I'm looking in the rearview mirror, expecting any time that our supervisory staff is going to come in and go, you know what, I can hire two guys for what you're making,
Right.
and they'll go to sleep at night every night behind the FOP hall.
Right.
And, it just got to that point. But, I didn't have 20 years in. So I had to make that decision like, hey, listen, I'm going to pitch the tent and I'm going to go. First of all, thank God for your service. Thanks for your
Oh
20
my
years.
God.
But you know what it's like when you feel that you're always worried that inside and down, the
Right.
bad guys are going to be the bad guys. Our job is to chase them. Their job is to run.
Right.
And people just don't get how simple the math is with crime and criminality. They think everything is like some, big show like CSI Miami, something like that.
Right.
90% of what you did was people pissed off at other people, fighting people, having to do reports, and then people victimizing people, robbing and beating and killing and raping, and they didn't give a shit about anybody. But you know, did you? I believe in what Brian says, and I believe in what you said, Chris, that the community stood behind you and what you were doing, and there was a very small vocal minority that was constantly getting up in the shit and making the news and making the headlines that cops are bad. I
Right.
mean, I think I came from the most corrupt agency in Michigan. We had people arrested out of roll call. We had the feds come in and take reports and file cabinets and police vehicles as evidence. So I know what that feels like.
Right.
But I was never dirty. And you know, we always said I'll never work with or hang around with anybody that's involved in any of
Right.
that stuff. So how do you get that across? Now, what was different when you walked across the street and interviewed for another agency? Because what people don't get that are on this podcast, that are listening right now, is cops are leaving by the droves. Some cops are forsaking all of their benefits and everything else and saying, I just can't do it anymore. And people equate police with like a security force. You're a highly trained
Right.
operator that knows your AO, and you go in every day and you know what's anomalous. You know which cars belong. You know who doesn't belong. So you're constantly on the prowl. So take me into that moment when you knew that leaving was the right thing and that the other agency was the right place to go. How did that feel?
So I mean, it felt kind good, and it felt weird because the 21 years is what you know. It's the devil you know, and then you're going into a new agency, and it's the unknown. But the the line was for me was I knew that where I was in Illinois, their motivation was to go after policemen, and people were, and that's why they're leaving by the droves. I mean, they
Right.
still want to do the work, but they don't want to go to prison, which I get. And when I came to Florida, you're going to an agency that wants to take time, money, and effort to train you so you do the best you can, so they
Right.
don't have to worry about it.
Right.
So you have a sheriff or a chief or whatever that goes, yeah, maybe he probably shouldn't have shot at the police. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we talked to him, and this is the training that we go through, and that this is what we did, or this is how it happened, and you have I guess the forethought to realize that with everything going on in the world, it's more training, more scenario based training, and roll call trainings and specialty trainings, and having so and so go to, I don't know. A firearms training or a de-escalation training and come back and talk about it at a roll call. So you're going from an anti-training to pro training to give you the tools to be successful. And that's when I knew it was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That's
Brian,
what,
just
yeah.
I want to throw this out there. Okay, so you would go in to your patrol sergeant and you'd say, "Hey, this is the caper I've got going on," and he's asking like, "Hey, what evidence do you got? You know, is anybody injured? What's going on?" And then all of a sudden, that later the shift lieutenant would be reading the report and going, "Nah, you know what, mens rea, you got to establish the elements here. Get back on that report and tell me what happened here." And then somebody would be going, "Hey, send another car out to see if anything's on the ground and take a photo or get a witness." And then you'd go to the DA or the ADA, the prosecuting attorney's office, Brian, and they would look over your affidavit for arrest or your warrant, and they'd go, "Hey, I got to tell you, this looks like a weak, disorderly caper. And you know, was there anything else going on?" You go, "Yeah, the alcohol." And everybody was going to try to build the biggest, best case in chief possible to
Right.
ensure successful prosecution, or that they would take a plea and not tie up the system. And it seems like that's not what the DA or their office is used for anymore, right?
No,
Am I
no,
wrong?
no. I mean,
No.
it's first. More, I've heard now what they do is prior to my leaving, they actually assigned one person to go. I don't know if it's an algorithm or whatever to go through all because the police reports all go central now.
Sure.
Um, to go and do an algorithm, or they go into FOIA. However they do it, anything that shows resisting police, because they know there was obviously a fight. We're going to pull all those reports, not to find the bad guys, but they want to get ahead. They want to get ahead of all the news media coming to their front door because somebody got kicked. You know, somebody got kicked during a fight over a knife or something like that. They want to get ahead of the game. So it's not even building a case anymore. It's more building a case against the police instead of building a case against the bad guy. and it's just, you just see a lot. It's just, there's no way that's going to work. There's no way people are going to come and go, you know what, I really want to do this work. It's going to be horrible.
Right.
Yeah, and so one of the ways I try to kind of generalize this to explain to people about is, putting it in a different domain. And I know Greg's been there for some of these conversations, but I remember talking to a doctor, and he was talking about they have this, their malpractice insurance rates are super high, and there's all these
Right.
issues in the medical field, and this is what happens. And like, they sat there, him and another doctor, talking about these horror stories of doctors and the things that they did and how hard it is to actually lose your medical license. I think it's a little easier now, but meaning to go after these people, and they're just going through just the worst stuff you've ever heard. And this is, these are doctors, these are where people are coming in
Right.
for care, right? And I just asked, I was like, well, did you like report these people? Did you go after them? Did you turn them in? Do you have some way? And they're like, well, no, like we just kind of have to like stay away. You just got, not enough people. I was like, okay, now think about that when you're looking at law enforcement, or you're
Right.
thinking about something else. Like, do you see how this works? How, like, if why is it okay for you to walk past it, but you want them held to a different standard? Like,
Right.
that's ridiculous. And
Right.
you can think of, go anyone right now. What do people constantly bitch about? Oh man, I'm always dragging other people on the team at the office, or so and so never does shit, or you know what,
Right.
they're only at work this amount of time. It's like, okay, so do you think that's just unique to your office, or is that
Right.
unique
Right.
to everywhere in the freaking world?
Right.
Like,
Right.
you have certain people, and so the idea is, as we always tell people, like, hey, what you walk past is what you're willing to accept. Well, they're okay saying that about police officers. They don't like it when you say it about their own career. You're like,
Right.
well,
Right.
you walked right past that person? You allowed that to happen. That
Right.
means you're now part of the problem. And it's hard for people to see it. You're a visible sign of authority. People, have
Right.
always talked about, we're against the man, F the man, and authority and this. And like, I get that, especially when you're young.
Sure.
That's normal, right? And then you get older, you kind of realize, like, that's kind of stupid. Like, we need to have
Right.
some order here, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
so that's been constant, but what's changed now, and even to the point where, was it earlier this year, Greg, the director of the FBI even said,
Yep.
he said, law enforcement officers are being murdered at a higher rate than ever
Right.
seen before. And okay, most people just heard that and whatever, but when the director of the FBI uses the word murder, he knows what that word means, right?
Right.
It doesn't mean killed in the line of duty, right? It
Right.
means direct. This is a homicide we're talking about. This is something with intent. So now you get to see the data and the numbers change, and that sort of doesn't catch up with, like, your story. And what can happen with police officers leaving agencies happens sort of faster than those numbers come in, right?
Right.
Because people react and they're like, well, F this, I'm done, I'm out of
Right.
here. And we're all sitting around seeing the same problems, so we all go somewhere. And then the problem, it takes what, a year, 2 years for the rest of those numbers to catch up, and people go, oh wow, we really went wrong back here. And you're like, yeah, we told you this would happen a
Right.
long time ago. Like, we
Right.
knew where this was going to go.
Right.
Here's the thing about uh, uh, being a witness, firsthand witness to kinetic combat, to operating in a combat zone. You get to see lawlessness, and at a level that other people would never understand unless they walked in your shoes and saw what you saw. It's even hard to talk about those things. What they
Right.
also don't understand is being that on the streets after, again, I say double digits all the time. If you're not collecting longevity, you're still a rookie, right?
Right.
But think about how many blow tops. Think about how many homicides. Think about how many fatal wrecks. Think about unattended deaths. All the other stuff that you have to endure. And what really pisses me off is when I see the people go, well, you don't know what I face. Well, I fucking know what you face. And a lot of coppers out there know what you face, right? The
Right.
idea was that they don't understand sometimes how hard it is, first of all, to pass all the background checks and become a cop and become a good cop, and then get out on the street and actually gain the rapport of the community and gain the trust of a judge. Do you know what it's like to testify in front of a judge? If you
Oh.
don't, then the idea of, there's a standard. Judges know you, and they know that
Right.
there's cops that do nothing but bullshit capers all the time, and they don't give them any slack. There's a whole life that goes on out there after
Right.
dark, and that's why we encourage people to do ride-alongs all the time and go out there, because they don't see it. And then all of a sudden, think about it. you have to talk to your wife, talk to your kids, talk to your significant other, no kids, maybe just your dog, whoever the fuck you got. And you're
Right.
now saying, okay, I'm going to give away. Now, again, I want to point out that thank God Chris had 20 in, right? And so he was vested in some manner. But there's coppers now that have 6 or 9 or 11
Yeah.
in that aren't.
Right.
And they've got to go. And you know what? The fear, the anxiety of saying, this is the only thing in life that I'm good at. I was a good cop. I was proud of being a cop. I never made a DUI. That wasn't what I did. I only did felony action. I like getting in there and mixing it up with the
Right.
bad guys because they didn't want to go. And then all of a sudden, somebody said, nah, not so much anymore. And guess what? The answer, because people think, well, if we just weren't there, it wouldn't happen. Yeah, you're right. So
Right.
let's do this. Let's pull the cops out of those neighborhoods. And what are those neighborhoods now? Let's defund the cops. And
Right.
what are those neighborhoods now? And the
Right.
final part of my rant is that Brian and I see a lot of these monies, more money, I think, now for training that's ever been available ever. And you know what? Some PhD that's never been on the road, that the way they conducted stuff is saying, hey, I've always wanted to get my book published. They come in and they go, this is the training that this community needs. And de-escalation, we don't even have a working definition for de-escalation, but they're willing to have these courses all over. And the great thing, I sent one to Brian, it was yesterday maybe, that it was a 4-hour instructor's course on de-escalation. I can't learn to wipe my ass in 4 hours, more or less be an instructor, Chris.
Well,
How do you, come on, tell me.
and here's the funny part. So now it's a week class. It's a week-long class. You know how we learned, and we were probably more successful watching the guy who's been on the job 15 years
Yeah.
talk the person off the bridge.
Exactly.
So and then you have this, a PhD comes in and teaches a class. I'm like, bro, he's like, well, you want to talk about this and you want to do that. I'm like, bro, what are you talking about? Sometimes you go, hey, listen, man, you find a rapport and on any level, you find a rapport
Yes.
about, you like the Cowboys, you like we talked a guy out of stabbing himself. I told him that he didn't want to tell his parents that he was gay. I told him my partner was gay. I mean,
There you go.
Yeah.
my partner's not gay, but it's just that's what you do. You can't.
We called it the Father Flanagan. You had to be an actor. You had to be a negotiator. You had to be the mom or the dad or the kid at that moment, and you had to appeal to people because that's a big part of it too. It wasn't all just car chases and foot chases and shooting back and forth. And you used a word. I'll give you a word that you used that was so rare, it was remarkable back in the day when I was on the road. And I truly am a dinosaur. You used the word ambush. Okay. I remember 2 incidents of ambush that were so important that were taught at the Macomb Police Academy. I was going to drop another F-bomb, Oakland and Wayne Police Academy, to teach cops how not to die. Because cops didn't get ambushed like that back then. It wasn't like that. And you know what? That's now part of the lexicon. If you had the old soldiers that wrote Tactical Edge now, there'd have to be extra chapters in that son of a gun. Hey, look behind you. Hey, the camera might be your axon that gets you convicted for being empathetic on a scene and not doing. You remember a couple of years ago, Brian, the caper that we covered where the person didn't shoot and they fired the person because they didn't shoot. That would never happen nowadays. The whole administration would be tossed out. So people, I believe this, Chris. I believe that a community and people get the police work they deserve, but they've got to just hurry up and decide what it is that they want. And so you're feeling now that the yoke has been lifted off you, that you're among professionals that want to do it right, that the training is going on. So let me ask you to cast the lens backwards. And Marin's born and raised in Chicago, and you can tell. All you got to do is spend 5 minutes with him. You can see that shit all over him. But if you could shine that big Klieg light, that big stream light, the Kel light, back on the AO that you used to work, back on the streets, back on your people, do you see it changing anytime soon? And what would it take to change? What do you think? What do you feel about that?
I think the way it's going to change is 2 things. Number one, I think what's going to happen is people are going to have to get educated of who they need to take the fight to, because unfortunately, right now, the people on the street think that it's the cops' fault, and it's our fault in their eyes because we're out there doing the work. Well, after this, after that, then why are these people on the street? There's nothing I can do about that. That's between them.
That's
'cause
not
we
your
got
job.
no,
Right.
because one of the last discussions I got into with a guy was we were talking about he kind of started ranting about you're all racist and all this other stuff and blah 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 and whatever. And I had my dog with me. And it was a domestic. And as he gets closer, I'm like, hey, give me a minute. Let me get this cleared up and be right with you. So anyway, so long story short, he came over and I said, okay, listen, you want to talk? We'll talk like men. And what he ended up learning is when they send out a radio call, we don't ask what color you are.
Yeah.
That's
We go.
exactly true.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
so he goes, well, what do you, I go, and I said, and I go, that radio call comes out, we all come. We come, we do what we can do. And I'm not saying all, 99% of us, 99.7% of us come out and do what we have to do within the parameters and the letter of the law.
Yeah.
Anything after that, that's up to the state. I mean, I could write the best report if the state attorney
It does
goes,
not matter.
not really
Yeah.
good. It
Yep.
doesn't matter. It goes. I said,
And
so,
many times that's political, right, Chris?
right.
Many times their
Yeah.
decisions are political to get reelected or to win some kind of favor rather than in the best interest of the community. I want to make sure
Exactly.
people know that.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And you're right. And then so when they get frustrated, who are
Yeah.
they going to get frustrated? They're going to get
Right.
frustrated at the person that's sitting in the office down the block
No.
that
So-
works
The
from
person in the
95,
car right in front of them.
or when I roll up license sirens at 2:30 at 02 dark 30, and you got fireworks and firecrackers and people fighting, and then he was out here last week. I'm like, oh, okay. So I think it's just a whole learning process of what really is the truth and what really happens. And I really think ride-alongs are one of the best things. I
Yeah.
really
Absolutely
do,
agree.
because then you're out there and they see this and you're like, and it then or you have these conversations. Well, how come you're always in this neighborhood? Well, this is where the crimes occur. So
Yeah, it's like,
so we're responding.
Yeah.
We're responding to the radio calls again.
Yep.
I don't ask where. I don't ask who. I
You just go.
go to the radio call, and I think as people learn, they have to take responsibility for their own neighborhoods. And
So
I think if that
you're
that
spot on,
continues,
Chris.
I think if it continues, it'll swing the other way.
that's
Yeah.
that's the big thing. It's almost like sometimes you see these issues where I'm like, the person's upset at the police. You're like, that's the same person yelling at the gate agent because their plane is delayed. It's like, dude, the gate agent had nothing to do.
And we know it's part of our job.
Yeah,
and
you do. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
It should. We know that
Yeah.
it's part of our job that we got to let people burn steam. Burn off steam up until a point.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. And so, but that's the customer service part of. But you're literally going like, dude, you're trying to kill the messenger here. Like,
Right.
You didn't show up because you chose to show up to that scene. Someone called, and you're the person that has to go. And I think that kind of goes into, in my outside perspective, it seems like sometimes, and it's not like a critique, it's just something that I've noticed, that a lot of times some law enforcement agencies aren't good at communicating some of this stuff to the public, meaning what their real job is. And the problem is that you fucking go every time you're called.
Right.
Like that's the problem, because then what happens? Maybe someone dies needlessly or something happens and it becomes catastrophic, and then everyone goes, oh shit, we got to figure out a better way to do this, or we got to get some training on this. We had no idea, we're outside. But like, and that's the thing. It's like, well, you called me and I showed up, and I did the best thing that I could.
Right.
And now we realize something happened, that we did something we should no longer do. But I didn't know that at the time. Right. And it's almost like because people call 911 and you show up, like you've consistently had to do jobs that you were not trained to do. Like I've seen so many things where show up like, nowhere does a police officer get trained to handle the situation. Like nowhere. Like that does not happen. Like, holy crap, how did not everyone die in this situation? Right. I'm like, how did this not go completely sideways? Because they're doing things, and I think that's the problem, is then people go, well, you did it. It's like, well, fucking, you didn't show up, motherfucker. Like,
right.
Well, exactly. If you would have, you wouldn't have called 911.
Right.
You wouldn't have called in the cops. You would have handled it on your own, and it would have been probably efficient. And I would add to one thing to your observation, Brian, and I'm spot on. And Chris, I love what you said about ride-alongs. Do you know what? Hollywood doesn't make movies about certified public accountants.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
no weekly
Right.
TV show. Do you get what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
about that damn real estate agent that also does taxes on the side?
Yeah.
People want to know what the cops are doing. Hell, Cops is still on the air. All of
Right.
these things are there because people are fascinated with who would stand up and do
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
that's why there's such a small percent of coppers based on the whole society, such a small amount of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine, because it takes a special person to say, I shall defend the Constitution. I shall defend your rights. I shall ensure that you
Right.
get due process. And then somebody comes up and you goes, yeah, there's a lot of bad cops. Well, no, there's not a lot of bad cops, but there are bad cops.
Sure.
And there's bad librarians, and there's bad TV anchors,
Right.
and there's bad hockey players. But see, we can't look at it that way. We have a skewed vision. Back to looking through the straw, we want to pick and choose the battles that we fight. And the idea is if we pick and choose too hard, we're not going to have that elite team anymore. We're going to have whoever they can bring in to fill the spot. And guess what? When the pay goes down and the training goes down, what do you think happens? You're going to get a lot more of those bad cops. You're going to get.
Right.
They just caught a guy. I don't know if you saw that in the news this morning. They caught one of the top 10 criminals on the East Coast somewhere working as an armed security guard at a location. You know what I'm saying? I was sending it around. How can that happen? That happens because we're so busy trying to find somebody to fight. We're so busy with that chip on our shoulder that we're not looking that it's destroying the fabric of our communities.
No, 100%. And what's gone away is just sitting down and having a conversation with the people in your sector. Like I knew everybody in my sector. I knew everybody in my sector. I knew who was going to run, and the people that I knew I was going to fight in 2 days, I would stop and check and see how they're doing. It was business. It's not personal. It's business. But guess what? When their mama needed food, or hey, I think my mom is hanging around with somebody bad. They're bad themselves. Hey man, could you help me out? Sure, I'll tell you what. I'll help you out. But listen, next time you hear some heroin going down, I want to be the first. You call me. Like there's no more of that because you don't know. Well, I might get afraid. I might get in trouble for saying something, or I might get to. There's just no. There's no communication, and then the old saying, "It takes a village," and it does. Good and bad. It takes that village, and I just don't think there's enough people educated or asking the right questions, or enough policemen that want to go out and do that kind of educating because they don't know where to draw the line, and they're not given the freedom to do that.
No, you're right. And thorn in my side, the Civilian Review Board, not against it, folks.
God.
Shut up for a minute and just learn. Civilian Review Board, you're saying, okay, you need that, yet the standard for a jury is a jury of your peers.
Right.
So the idea is that if you've never been trained, if you've never seen it, if you've never done a ride along, but your opinion-based testimony is that I probably should have done a different thing, that's horseshit. Artifacts and evidence support reasonable conclusions.
Right.
Look, you put a lot of people in jail. How many times, well, that's not a fair question, so I'll withdraw. My thing is that I know the capers I lost. And the capers I lost were whenever you went to a jury trial and the jury was kind of hemming and hawing because, you know what, it was a crime, but they didn't see it that way. I'll give you a perfect example. Do you know that in Colorado, for example, where I built a caper, if you think about kidnapping is moving a person from one location to another against their will. The person did not want to go. So there was a caper and it was a long protracted thing, but the suspect grabbed the person out of their enclosed vehicle, a truck, pulled them out, and then assaulted them on the ground. Well, you know what? That's kidnapping right down the line, okay, for the Colorado Revised Statutes. Now, the jury didn't see it that way because what does the jury know about kidnapping? Just like everybody that brings you a bag of stuff and goes, hey, here, do DNA evidence on this, and they cop, right? So the idea is that if the public educates themselves, but there's also a DA's office and a mayor and the town council that gets together to educate the police. One of the things that we did when we were in Iraq is started educating people about the night letters and about the IEDs and about what body bombers look like. Why? Because they didn't know either. And the people on the street in Iraq weren't the ones that were against you. It was the bad guys. And then we protracted that to go out into the farming villages of Afghanistan. The same thing. They thought we were Soviets. They didn't know where Kabul was. They had no idea what the capital of their own country was. And you know what? A more educated person uses less violence and they'll talk it out. And that is the key.
100%.
That's a huge part of the answer, Chris. Listen, Brian, I want to make sure that we talk about briefly Chris's podcast. because the three cops talk sometimes when I listen sounds almost like a dart game over a couple of beers and a brawl. What's your guys? And I don't want to take your time, Brian, but what's your big end state wish? Because it's a great podcast and I love tuning in. What do you want out of that podcast? What's the real meat on the bone, Chris?
The real meat on the bone is that people get educated. So we
Gotcha.
educate them through, either humor or stories, or, we bring people on. Like we bring people on that, the guy did 10 years for murder, and
Right.
how and how people could change, and learning for us how to help people make change or maintain that they keep their change. I thought ultimately it's just getting people educated and trying to build a relationship back between civilians and police, because it's so far skewed that, I mean, we're tired of fighting people that we don't need to fight. And we're tired of getting killed, and we're tired of killing people that pull out guns and knives and stuff on us that it doesn't even have to be just because we're the police. That's the meat on the bone.
Now, and I'll tell you, Brian, that's a point you and I had made. If you got the gun, drop the gun. If you're in a stolen car, pull over. It's a property crime. Walk away. Even if it's a stolen gun and it had been used in a number of homicides, listen, that's what forensics is for. Don't run it out. Don't battle it out, because these are people that are trained to ram you, release the dog on you, tackle you, and put you in metal wrist restraint. I don't know where that got lost. You know what I'm saying? Where did that get lost in the message? I remember civics class. I knew what was going to happen if you did the wrong thing in front of the cop.
Right. Well, and also, now there's just a lot of things. Well, back in the day when you used to build rapport with these guys, where you'd pull over a car and stuff. There's some dope in there. There's like, I don't know, a gram. You're like, here, listen to me. Eat it. Go home. Whatever. It's a gram. I'm not taking you to jail over the gram. I'm not going to do this. Just listen. Just let's get you home safely, and we're going to call it a night. Then the next time something you're at the 7-Eleven by yourself or whatever, and some guy wants to jump, you turn around and guess who's behind you? The same gangbanger you left. So I think a lot of that has gone away. A lot of that old, and when people hear old policing, it's like, I'm not talking about blackjacks and staff gloves or whatever.
Exactly.
It's about going out there and building the rapport with your community and stuff like that. I think that's really missed, and I think that's where a lot of this is, because there's a lot of misinformation.
You can talk to people. Like, I know people back in the 70s in Chicago would sit down with the police, the community, and the gangbanger, like the heads of the gangs, and they would sit there and go, all right, look, you're not going to do anything past this street, okay? You're going to stay away from this school, okay? And they worked it out. You know what I mean? Like, among warring factions, to create some sense of security for that individual neighborhood. And, you're going like, well, wait, they said, it's like, look, you're never going to get rid of crime. There's always going to be some, because it has a socioeconomic element. It's beyond law enforcement. It has nothing to do with law enforcement's after the fact, basically. Like that if we're not doing these other things we need to do for the economy and doing this for people, then they're going to turn to crime. Now, you can make that percentage of people do that smaller, but you can't get rid of it, right? So it's, how do we target this stuff? And I just kind of think it's important. One other thing I did want to talk about was, a lot of people say, well, we got to find better people, and we got to recruit the best people, and and it's like, look, you got who you got. And plus, you've got, listen to your story right now. So this is only the second time I've talked to you, and I've listened to some of your podcasts, but you literally just started out saying, well, I was in finance and I always wanted to be a cop. I always wanted to do this. So I went and did it. My first paycheck was, less than, my first year's salary was less than a bonus than I used to have. Okay. Well, that's a good start for the type of person. And then you did 21 years at that agency and said, I can't stand it here anymore. You didn't go get another job, Chris. You went, I still want to do what I want to do. Okay. So I think we've got the right people. Someone who says, hey, I want to, especially now, today, right now in 2022, with everything here, someone stands up and says, yeah, I want to go be a police officer in my community. Okay. You already have the right people. They're already there. You're not going to go find better people. So if you want to say, hey, we're going to make it more competitive and increase the initial salary or something, okay, I get that, because you get what you pay for in this line of work. Anything security or law enforcement related, you get what you pay for. So if you want to make it more competitive, by all means. I mean, you can go back to, that's what all of those researchers did in the 70s and 80s when they found these different police departments with different corruption. They literally just put the best, greatest minds studying it. They literally came back and said, yeah, you gotta pay these guys more money, and then you won't have a corruption problem anymore. And they're like,
Right,
oh,
right,
okay. So they started
right,
raising salaries, and suddenly that started going away. It's like,
right,
yeah, because they have no incentive now. They're still doing it. They're doing the job they want to do. But
right.
this guy over here can't put food on his table. But and it's just one thing, and I kind of want to get your opinion on that and how that works. Where you hear people like, oh, we got to go hire better people. It's like, what the
I mean, of course, everybody wants the best of the best, but I think if you have
sure,
people that want to be there, and you're always going to have that guy. I mean, that you're always going to have that guy that I took this job because my dad was a cop, and I
yeah,
get to work for
yeah,
25 years, and I get to retirement.
yeah, of course,
Don't even worry about those
yeah,
guys. Go put
Right.
them on a stop sign. Go, go. I'll tell you what. Anybody that crosses jaywalks, you write him a ticket. That's what you do.
Yep.
But you take the people that you have and you hone them and you train them based on what their skills are, along with honesty. And perfect example. I wanted to work undercover so bad, but I'm like, but I knew I could get tattoos on my face, grow on my hair. The way I stand,
yeah,
I mean, I'm a cop.
Yep.
I just so I knew my limitations, and you have to have a boss that goes, yeah, I appreciate your ambition, but no, it ain't really gonna work.
Yep.
Dogs,
Yep.
jump squad, sniper, you got that.
yeah.
It's all you, but tattoos on your knuckles and face is just not gonna happen. And taking those skills of what they're good at. We got a guy. We had a guy on our team, not a big ticket writer, but he can sell ice to an Eskimo.
There
Guess
you
what?
go.
His job was, whenever there was a critical incident that he thought that he can use his silver tongue, he was there.
Yeah.
I mean, and you kind of and they took that talent and they let him go to classes, and then he started teaching other people, and some people weren't as good, but
They
they
got,
they got the job done, or they held on long enough for him or her for him to show
Right.
up. So
Right.
I think I agree. I think for the majority of the people, we have the right people. I think it's training and honing in on and getting what do they want to do and how can we get them there.
yeah, and
Amen.
that's a big push too, and the military's been doing the same thing coming out of 20 years at war, that they're finally realizing like we have to figure out how to take care of our people because we're breaking them. We're breaking everyone. And same thing.
Right.
It's like, I mean, law enforcement suicide rate is through the roof. You're more likely to get died from suicide being a police officer than you are being shot on duty. Like that's a fucking problem. Like, and we're just now realizing like you have to look at this as I'm hiring you, Chris, for the next 25 years, and I
Right.
want you to be at the top of the game because you're interacting with everyone in our city. Like that should be if you just took a step back and think, who do I want to police this society? If you had some
Right.
ability to create a civilization, think about who you want as police. Man, you want your best and brightest. You want to take care of those people because that's where the rubber meets the road, and that
Right.
tells you a lot about where we are as a people and as a society as a whole is what's happening on the ground. So like you have to set those people up for success the best way possible. And I look at it as a two-way street. If I invest in you, Chris, and I give you the best training, the best mental health, the best medical care, everything you can
Right.
have, right? Guess what else I get to do? I get to hold you to a higher standard, right? Because
Right.
I'm giving you the absolute best that's out there. And if you're not giving that back or you're not meeting it, see ya. And
Right.
and that's the point is you get rid of the people who aren't delivering and you help the people that
Right.
really need it the most. And I it gets lost in a lot of ways.
Right. And I also think a lot of things that get lost in the same thing is, well, all this technology and all this and all
Mm.
that. And I was just having this conversation with my dad the other day. My dad was in Vietnam, and we were talking about the show that we did on mental health. And I found out some things about my dad and my uncle that happened in Vietnam and stuff like that. And they don't have PTSD and whatever. They were very, very fortunate. But a lot of their friends did. And we were talking about this, and I said, well, what was the difference? He goes, the difference? He goes, World War One, World War Two, Korea, and when he was in Vietnam, you just didn't get on a plane and come home. You were with your friends, your buddies, on a ship, on the base for 30, 60, 90 days. And all they did on those 30, 60, 90 days is you hung out with your buddies, and all you did was talk about it. You got it. It was 90 days of straight therapy. And I think a lot of the stuff that when we start looking at having the best and looking the best, we have to look at all aspects. Like it's just not all, you know, current technology. It's like you have to talk to a lot of people to get the best of the best.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
to
true.
make sure that that you have the best of the best and you train in that way. And maybe it's taking a sabbatical. I mean, PhDs take sabbaticals,
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. But I just think it to get the best of the best. The training is awesome, and I think the trainers. The trainers that are staying that have to stay on point, and sometimes it's good just to go back old school too.
No, you're right. And again, you gave us a definition of old school. Remember, when I grew up as a copper, I had a sap pocket on both my left and my right leg. I had a pair of sap gloves. I had the, Kel-Lite flashlight.
Right,
You had the chemical aerosol spray. Absolutely everything was a war zone, and you were fighting every single night. You're getting your shit ripped off and
right,
bent. But it's not that world anymore, and it doesn't
right,
have to be that world. We learned, meaning cops learned, and it trained. The training changed, and it influenced the behavior on the street. That's why our tagline is "Training changes behavior." I've seen it happen, but you're exactly right too that it's pendulous. So it changes over generations. And you know what? Sometimes when a
right.
person leaves, they take with them that corner,
Yeah.
that street corner that they worked, those ethical
Yeah,
things that they worked, and then all of a sudden you got to build it up again. And what's not happening, it's not happening. The old sage graybeard that's kneeling down with the young kid is the FTO anymore, and going, this is how you run things here, and these are the people, and this guy over here is the pastor, and that guy that does the car washes, he's also the best source of information. I went back to the road and I was like, this is not happening anymore. I
right,
could see it coming. I could see that art of police work was going away. And then I
right,
heard this warrior culture, and I saw the vests on the outside of the uniforms, and I saw people working the road with beards and tats, and I was like, wait, what did? So sometimes I'm saying, Chris, we asked for it and we got it,
right,
right?
right.
And
Absolutely.
and and
Right.
I think that the
100%.
communities asked for it and they got it too. We started promoting the huggy kissy feely, and what happened is sometimes that water balloon slipped through our hands. So
Yep.
I only got one more question, Brian, that I really
Yeah.
want to hit on. Chris, do you think I want to preface it by saying I truly feel I got to tell my wife all the time, our CEO, former copper, a lot of years on the road, toughest human I ever met. And she's going, it's never going to go back. And I go, it's going to go back. Things are going to go back to equal. Everything is going to be better. Communities are going to get stronger. How do you feel about that? I believe it. She
It will.
doesn't. What do you think?
It will.
Okay.
It will. And I just think because I think people are realizing now that I don't know if you call it the media hype or the neighborhood hype or whatever. I think everything is kind of like calming down now, and people are really starting to see, you know, beyond the smoke and mirrors. I think people are really starting to see that the police, the police are needed, trained police are needed,
Yes.
and I think they're starting to look at what more we really need and what more that we really do. And I think it's over time it's going to come to an equal, and then and hopefully you'll have that pendulum, of course. But I think at some point it's going to come back to zero.
I
I really do.
I agree with that and kind of look at it in a number of ways, right? So we have sort of this, this culture and society where, information is instantaneous and it spreads quickly and it shifts opinion. Well, so for all the bad things that causes, there's also good things because people
Right.
learn. They go, oh, wait a
Sure.
minute, this is kind of like, meaning too now, like when a city makes a decision or an area or a state's attorney, whatever, and they go, well, we're going to go with this and we think it's going to be this way. Well, we get the results faster now. Like it's not, you
Right.
don't have to wait 5, 10 years and
Right.
then everyone talks about that horrible decision someone made in 1978 which caused this. No, you hear about it in 12 months or 18 months. You get that instantaneous, like, hey, this is going wrong, we can right the ship, in stride. We don't have to wait for
Yep.
something. So
Right.
there's a positive that, and I always say that too, but there's clearly, like, attacks are up on police. There's this feeling of anti-police sentiment. Well, guess what else there is, Chris? I bet you have more support now in some ways than you had earlier on in your career, with people walking up to you going, hey, I appreciate what you
Yep.
do, or hey, thank you, or let me buy that for you, let me do that. Like,
Right.
so there's always that balance. I try to kind of remind people, it's like, okay, You've seen all this bad. Well, what other good things that weren't there a long time ago? And people are like, you know what, you're right. People are stepping up more. People are having these discussions, right? And it's sort of changing. So I'm glad, like I'm happy to hear that you sort of
Yep.
see it that similar way, that it goes back. It's a little bit cyclical. We get better for it in the long run. I
Right.
mean, police training. I mean, just think about your training now today in 2022 compared to what it was like 10 years ago. Compare
Right.
that to what it was like 10 years before that when you're first getting started. Compare that to 10 years prior to that.
Right.
Things have evolved quickly, and because of technology and because of what happens and spread of information, it evolves even faster now. And
Yep.
it's either got to evolve to something good or we all die. I don't know. Like,
Right.
it's either going to keep getting better or just catastrophic end to everything.
Right.
But I'm of the belief I think it'll get better. But yeah,
I agree.
that's kind of the way I look at it. I don't know, Greg, do you have
Yeah,
anything else you want to?
I would add one thing. Well, first of all, two things. One, fan of the show.
Yeah.
Brian's going to put in the
Three
notes
Cops
of the
Talk.
show how to get
Yeah.
a hold of the Three Cops Talk.
Thank you.
And everybody, please give it a listen. Tell Chris what you think.
Yeah.
And Brian, I think that the most common misconception. You and I have been working suicide pretty hard this last 3 weeks or so.
On a couple projects
on
we're doing.
specific
Yeah.
capers, right?
Yeah.
So it's really hard to not think about suicide all day long and then be depressed. Don't think, anybody that's listening to this podcast, don't think that you have to let things get to rock bottom before you fight your way out. That's the biggest lie about alcoholism or drug abuse or criminality or anything else. Look, if you can identify that you're in the shit, you can step out of the water, kick the muck off your shoes, and start over.
100%.
And so the same thing, I really believe the same thing with communities. Don't wait until it gets to the point that you can't do anything. You know, you're not doing anybody any favors. Step in early. Have your voice be heard. But that doesn't mean you have the legal right to resist the copper in front of you. What I'm talking about is go talk to his boss. Go talk to your town manager. Tell him, hey, I believe this, or how are things? Because sometimes you're going to learn a lot in the process. Don't let it get rock bottom. Nobody wins in an untenable game. Everybody loses.
Comply and complain. Absolutely, because that's the way it gets better. 100%.
That's it.
Get involved to get better.
It will get better because I tell you what, if that copper gets enough of those complaints, they're gone anyway. I don't care how effective they think they are. They're going to be out of that neighborhood in no time. Well, I tell you, Brian, it was a pleasure to have Chris on. We were afraid because sometimes, you know, you get a person on that's got a rival talk show and all they want to do is talk theirs up and nothing about the left of Greg, you know. And so we were worried about that. But I got to tell you, one day you got to have us on your show. We'd be honored to be on it.
Yep. No, that'd be great. I would love for you guys to come on because I really think that, you know, the more discussions that have and the more we get this word out, I just think the world's going to be a better place. I mean, I just think people have to learn. I mean, is it ever going to be nonviolent? No, but it's going to be a better place. And I think if we keep doing this, we will. I really do.
Yeah,
that's great stuff.
I agree, and I really appreciate your service, and I appreciate you coming on the show, Chris. Man, this has been great. We covered a lot. I can't believe actually we've already been talking for over an hour, so I thought we were like 25 minutes in. So I was like,
thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
So before you go, we're going to read you Garrity, Chris, just to make sure that you got your head in the right place. So,
well, I think
sorry, it's not funny if you're not a cop.
Thank everyone for listening too. If you've made it this far in the episode, I appreciate it, and don't forget that training changes behavior.